What's good, sports fans? Are you ready to elevate your live entertainment experience? Well, let me introduce you to SeatGeek, an amazing platform that connects you to your favorite events while saving you money. With SeatGeek, you can easily find tickets for sports games, concerts, and so much more, all in one place. The interface is user-friendly, making it simple to browse and compare prices. And one of the best features is the interactive seating chart. You can see exactly where you'll be sitting and how much you'll be spending, ensuring you get the best value for your money. But here's the best part. Check this out. By using my promo code, ChalkItUpSports, you can enjoy a one-time $20 discount on your first SeatGeek order. That's right, $20 off your first SeatGeek order. Imagine catching that thrilling game or concert without breaking the bank. It's a win-win situation. Plus, you'll be a part of a community of fans who eat, sleep, and breathe live events just as much as you do. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description to download the SeatGeek app today. And don't forget to use my promo code ChalkItUpSports for a one-time $20 discount on your first SeatGeek order. Get excited. Now let's get back to the show. What's good, you guys? This is your boy, Tone DeShields II. You guys are tuned in to Chalk It Up Sports via the Chalk It Up Network, where no matter if we win or if we lose, we just got to charge to the game. First and foremost, before we get too comfortable, before we get too deep into the nitty-gritty and the shenanigans, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. It means a lot to me. It goes a long way, right? Helps the channel grow. And also make sure you guys stay engaged, right? Make sure you guys are commenting. Make sure you guys are providing super chats if that's something you want to do. Super stickers, right? Also, if you guys want to, you can become a member of the channel. All you got to do is go to the actual channel itself, or even go below the video, right below the stream, and you'll see a join button. Entirely up to you. Listen, I try to make everything as affordable as I possibly can. And regardless, the show, the content does not move without the people. But, you know, one of the reasons we're here, obviously, we're going to talk birds, right? The NFL Combine, the Scouting Combine is here. Everything kicks off tomorrow in Indianapolis. It's going to be going on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I know a lot of you guys have a lot of prospects that you're excited to see, a lot of prospects that you're excited for the Philadelphia Eagles to target it. And I'll be frank with you guys. I'm fresh off of a vacation. I haven't really gotten too deep into a lot of the prospects just yet. So I'm going to use the Combine as an opportunity for myself to really learn more about these guys and do my own due diligence so we can tap a little bit deeper into that well. But I do have a special guest for you guys. Yes, a very, very special guest. I'm really excited to talk to this gentleman. To be honest, I'm in love with his football mind, right? He's one of the smartest guys I know in this thing. He's somebody that I tend to rely on when I need someone to make sense of what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, right? I'm more so on the passionate side of the game, right? I give you guys a lot of raw emotion, a lot of raw energy. This brother, this man, way more steady, way more even kill. Can't wait to bring him on. Let's not waste any time. This man does great work on his own YouTube channel, Gate City Sports. His name is Steve Hyder. Some of you guys call him Stat Sheet Steve. Gates, how you feeling, my man?
What's good, Tone? It's been a long time, man. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. I can't complain that one bit. It's so cool to talk to you at this point, especially because you and I haven't spoken, I think, since the beginning of the season, or was it just before the season started? I can't quite remember exactly.
It was just before the season started, and I gave you the hot take of the Saquon Barkley thing, where you asked me who would benefit the most for Saquon Barkley, and I told you Kenneth Gainwell.
It's so funny. A lot has happened since then. A lot has happened. Some highs, some lows, some even better highs. And Gates, the Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Super Bowl champions, man. I mean, obviously, we're going to get into a lot of the stuff going on in the offseason, but I got to ask you, right? When you think about how this season went, you watched every game week after week after week. All the varying narratives that came out about this team, how they developed their game plan and how they developed, their course of action, right? Their plan of action throughout the season. When you think about how they won this Super Bowl, how they got to this point, just walk me through the things that you were experiencing throughout this season with this team.
So I think the 2024 version of the Philadelphia Eagles is like from the coaching perspective, right? It's when we go into these camps, I taught mostly and coach mostly at the middle school and the high school level. We always talk about like forming an identity as a team, forming that core nucleus, like everybody, you got the high school level. It's like, close to 30, 40 kids together. NFL level, you got 53 on active. You got 16 practice squad roster guys, right? Plus you got some veterans you keep on the phone, so you got all these different people coming together for a common goal. And it don't always work, right? We saw that in the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles. That didn't come together. They didn't come to fruition. But the 2024 version, I thought like exemplified what that means, right? When those guys were serving the greater good, the greater cause, they put aside their personal benefits. They put aside their personal numbers in order to accomplish something great for everybody together there, right? I mean, Jalen, when that was probably sold to him and pitched to him, and they're telling him like, there's just no way you're going to get to 4,000 yards with this structure. You know what I mean? I'm sure that there's a part there that has to go like, oh man, I'm gonna have to deal with this crap. Like, come on, man. You got AJ, you got Devontae. They're telling them, they're probably like, oh man, like even though AJ almost still got 1,400 yards, if we're going to be real about it, if he had played all the games, he would have gotten it. But there's going to be a detraction somewhere, right? Think of your Dallas Goedert. When am I going to see a target? Like, you know what I mean? Imagine you're a guy you're in a bad situation in Washington. And you're told like, oh, you're going to a Super Bowl contender, but it's Philadelphia with Saquon.
It's crazy. It's just crazy, Gates.
John. Like, I thought that they exemplified what that meant to be like a team, like the team aspect of it, like the commonality of that single goal. And like, hey, as Jalen said once before, money's nice, championships are better. Stats are nice, the ring is better.
Bro, it's so funny to me because you have so many personalities on this team. You have so many guys that are Pro Bowlers, all pros, guys that are good and great in their own right, guys that have experienced their own fair share of success. You have those guys in the building, but then you have this balancing act with the younger guys, the rookies, the second year, the third year guys, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that stood out to me about this team was just how young they were, or how young they were, especially on the defensive side of the ball, right? And I know we touched on that offense, but I want to jump over to the defense if we can, because I think the defense, outside of Saquon being Saquon, right, and Jalen Hurts being more amicable to the game plan on offense, but I feel like the story of the season was defense, because I think when we spoke last, at least, we were just hoping for an average defense based off of where they were in 2023. They were essentially dead last in most meaningful categories in 2023. 2024 comes, you bring in Vic Fangio, you draft Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, you draft Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, you draft Jalen Hunt out of Houston Christian, you draft Jeremiah Trotter Jr. out of Clemson, right? You signed Zack Baun to a 1-year deal. You signed Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to a 3-year deal. You brought in Devin White, which didn't really become anything for us. There were so many moves that were made. Isaiah Rodgers finally got his opportunity to play this year, right? So that was kind of a latent decision that came to fruition. I mean, Nakobe Dean took that next step, right? Nolan Smith took that next step. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, they all, Moro Ojomo took that next step, right? There were so many things that happened, but it all comes back to Vic Fangio. So break down what you saw from Vic Fangio throughout this season and how they got to where they were in their Super Bowl and how exactly they held the Kansas City Chiefs, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes offense, how they held them to 0 points going into the third quarter.
Look, I think Fangio is one of those guys that it drives you crazy, right? Because like some of us who coach the game, we hate Fangio's system. It's incredibly difficult to coach. It just is. Like, and I'm very competent in what I do. I started off with special teams. I think I've already told a story before. Like one of the very first guys I ever really coached was Percy Harvin on special teams drill down in Virginia Beach. But to be honest with you, like after that, the next phases where they had me pretty much coaching was cornerbacks and receivers until I got basically worked in with quarterbacks. And it's difficult to teach these two high structured defenses where you're going to match and carry. Like there's an athleticism that has to be there and there's an intelligence that has to be there. There's a technique that has to be done. Some dudes don't like that, bro. Just straightforward, man. You know, some dudes just want to be athletes. Like, hey, man, I'm better than this dude. Let's just man up and play football.
A lot of guys don't want to think out there. They just want to react.
Exactly. So it's really difficult to like, it's not just the players. It's not just the guy who's actually coordinating the defense. It's the position group. It's your position group coaches. And like everyone has to be on the same page. And I think when you look at Vic Fangio, I think when you have a guy that's been in the league as long as he is, man, he's got so many strings that he can pull. He's got so many guys in that Rolodex that he can call upon. You know, the Christian Parkers, right? You know, you just look at these guys, you know, Hurt down on the defensive line. Like the only guy he really couldn't get was he wanted a particular linebacker coach and they had to use Nick's guy. You know, they went to one of Nick's dudes and they got the guy from the Titans that Nick knew.
Bobby King, right?
Bobby King, who was a dang good coach, man. Did a heck of a job, by the way. But let's not make the mistake about it. Where did Vic Fangio make his mark in the league? As a linebacker coach, coaching the Dome Patrol out there in New Orleans. You go back to his 49er teams, man, and what he had rolling out there at the linebacker spot. Like, I mean, this guy's always had a knack for coaching linebackers. He just does. So, like, I think as good as Bobby King was, Vic Fangio was always going to succeed with linebackers. I mean, he's gotten dudes paid in Miami, to be real with you. He got guys paid in Miami. You know, he had a kid that played a similar role to Baun. I think he overhung more because of the injuries on Miami's team in 2023 that it caused them to have to overhang more and play as an edge more than they had to do with, you know, in 2024, what they had to do with Zack Baun, but it's basically the same role. You know, those guys were teammates, by the way. Was it Wisconsin? So, I mean, it's crazy the way that Vic not only can coach his scheme, not only can coach his coaches, but the dude can evaluate talent. You know, I know some of the guys in the comment section probably remember me on Twitter, like telling people like, nah, man, Zack Baun, he's going to be good. That's a good signing.
I said that to people. And,
yeah,
you know, when we signed him, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Gates, but we were in lockstep with that. Because when we signed Baun, when the Eagles signed Zack Baun, I said to myself, I like what I've seen from him. I like what I've heard about him. What I did was, instead of reading the Eagles writers, right, I dove deep into the New Orleans writers to find out what they knew about him. And one of the guys said that this is going to be a piece that they're going to miss because he's a guy that can do damn near everything. Yes, he was drafted, you know, kind of be an overhang, be an edge guy, right? He's very athletic, but when he had his opportunity to start in those final 4 or 5 games for the Saints, I think they were dealing with injuries last season. He was a stat sheet stuffer, right? And in my opinion, the stat sheet stuffer is someone who's able to make an impact in various categories. He had sacks, pass deflections, interceptions, forced fumbles, tackles for loss, tackles. I mean, he was everywhere. He was a very active player. So when you extrapolate that and try to forecast that during his time with the Philadelphia Eagles, you say, okay, if he can find a way to multiply what he's done in those 4 or 5 games, we're going to have a heck of a player. And that's exactly what he did. He was a stat sheet stuffer for the Eagles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, showed up everywhere and did it all season long. Like one of those pieces to where normally I would, it's a weird thing, right? Because it's like, okay, if we have to pick and choose here, you can't forego Zack Baun. Like if it was any other organization who doesn't have the track record of the Eagles of getting defensive linemen and developing them, then I'd probably say like, no, you got to let Zack Baun walk. It's just easier to get a linebacker and pay a linebacker in today's league. Right. But because of the fact that we're so successful at what we do in the trenches, it's kind of like, I don't know, man. Like, I mean, how many of us thought that Nolan Smith was done? How many of us thought like all these dudes were done? And then like, no, when they really got their chances and opportunity, man, they really showed up. Like Moro Ojamo. Like it's easy to say Jalen Carter. Like Jalen Carter is going to succeed no matter what the system is. Moro Ojamo doesn't just succeed anywhere. He's got the underlying talent. I called him the biggest steal of the draft that year, but still, I knew that the fit was part of the reason he was the steal. Like I knew that playing inside of this type of system, like where you're going to play a gap and a half, this dude is a pretty good run defender and he's a pretty good pass rusher from the interior. So like when you get a guy like that, like a Moro Ojamo, you can see how well this coaching staff does with in terms of developing the talent. This is like it's a crazy situation we're in, Tone, just because like I've never had this amount of players that were important to a team that are up in free agency and never felt so confident that we'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's the part that's a little unsettling a little bit, right? I think even Howie Roseman spoke about this, how this is going to be a very unique offseason than what we're used to, right? This is because you have so many guys that were instrumental who are up to get paid, but you also have so many guys on the roster who are currently under contract, be it a rookie contract or long-term deals, who were instrumental as well. It's almost like you have a good problem. It's a good problem to an extent. You know, you mentioned it, right? Zack Baun, and he's up for a contract, and he should be priority number one. I agree with that 100%. There are other guys who they've priced themselves out of Philadelphia. It's just a reality. Milton Williams is probably going to get between 17 to 21 million a year. These guys are getting, the D tackles at least are getting wide receiver contracts now, right? Josh Sweat probably priced himself out of Philadelphia. The way he played in that Super Bowl, both him and Milton, the way they played in that Super Bowl, how dominant they were. There's a chance that you may see Sweat get between maybe 17 to 20, depending on how things go in the market, right? It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But in my humble opinion, because I know what I know about Sweat and Milton and how talented they are and how there's a premium on their positions, I wouldn't be surprised if the Philadelphia Eagles prioritize Zack Baun and Mekhi Becton.
So, like, look, when it comes to Josh Sweat, the way I have it read is, like, to begin with, guys, know that I'm a big Josh Sweat fan. This young man played out in the 7.57. He played out there at Smith High School. Just was a young man that was very well known from people in that area. I got a lot of friends that are still out in the 7.57 because I'm a veteran. Still got a lot of friends that are serving out there. They keep up with the high school athletics out there. And they told me before we even drafted Josh Sweat that, hey, man, that young man that's out there at Florida State, hey, man, that dude's a beast, bro. He can play. He's a really good player. But Josh Sweat, when I was doing the comp for him, like the comp that I came away with is Matthew Judon, right? 28-year-old. Last year, Matthew Judon was the hot name, right? Was on the trade block. You knew you had to trade for him. You knew you had to extend him. He was the hot name on the block right before the season started. He got 4 years, $54,500,000 at about 13.6 AAV, average annual value. Those numbers aren't, they're not what they seem, guys. I mean, the way you structure the contract is far more important than those bottom line numbers, but that's the surface level stuff, guys. That's what I would expect Josh Sweat is probably looking for. I'm not saying he's going to get it. That's what he's probably looking for from his agency. He's probably looking for 4 years, 4 years, somewhere around, 54 or 5, just depends if it's a 3-year contract or 4-year contract, but he wants that probably AAV to be around 13 million. That's what I would assume Josh Sweat is looking for. Now, could we get a hometown discount here in Philly? If you can get it done before the start of free agency, you probably could get him under that number a little bit.
Right.
I don't know that it'll happen now. It's hard to say, right? You don't know how he feels about taking a pay cut from the year prior. Like that's a tricky one, you know what I mean? So if you look at Zack Baun, like where would you comp Zack Baun? For me, this one's a little tougher because of the date of when they did these contracts, but the most recent one is Patrick Queen, which he signed it last year in 2024, right? It was a 3-year, $41 million deal, 13.6 AAV. All right. You got Bobby Okereke signed a 4-year, $40 million deal, which is about a $10 million AAV. I don't think he's going to be in the Trumaine Edmonds area, which is 4 at 72, 18 million AAV. Now, when I say I don't think he's going to be in that value range, Tone, that's assuming he doesn't hit the free market. If he hits the free market, I think he does have an opportunity to get up there. But I think if we can get that deal done before the start of free agency, before the start of the league calendar year, basically, if we can get that done before then, we probably can get it done for essentially around the Patrick Queen deal. So it'd be pretty similar in number to what you would pay Josh Sweat.
So how much are you factoring in? And I'm sure you are, but how much are you factoring in the fact that he's really only shown Matter of fact, I think the better question is, how much of an impact will the fact that he only has 1 year of a sample size in terms of him playing at this level? Now, granted, it was a hell of a season. And the way he played this year, it's very sustainable. So how much of a role will that 1 year sample size play into his potential contract, be it with the Eagles or be it on the open market?
I think it's a roll of the dice because good teams will take that into consideration, right? Especially when they're coming to the negotiations.
But teams are desperate in free agency.
It's a 1 year track record. Bad teams will make bad decisions and they will overpay. And it just, you don't know what bad teams are going to have that kind of cap space to make that kind of foolish of a move. Now, the one team I think, I'm not saying that they're bad, but I'm just saying that I could see them making a deal like that would have been the Commanders, but the Commanders paid Bobby Okereke. You know what I'm saying? They have Frankie Louvu there if they want to bring him back. I don't know that they would be circling the wagons trying to pick him up, Zack Baun. So I don't know if they would go in that direction. But I mean, I could see a team like that has that kind of cap space. I think Washington's got a steadier front office than they did in previous years. So I'm trying to give them a little grace here to see how they do. I still think
New England has a lot of money as well.
Yeah, I think trading Jahan Dotson inside a division was still kind of foolish. And I also think allowing the Eagles to move up in the draft ahead of you and take Cooper DeJean in hindsight, pretty foolish, if I'm being real. But I do think that they're on better footing than they have clearly been in previous years. I don't know. I'm trying to think in my head, like, who's that team? Who's that team that's stupid and has money? You know what I mean? Like, that's a team you got to watch out for.
That's a good question, right? Let me. Well, while you speak, I'm going to look at the cap space right now because again, you're right. I spoke about this. I'm going to say about a week or two ago that this is the time of the year where desperate teams really show themselves. Free agency is the land of overpaying guys. It's the land of you can't avoid it. And that's why it was so important for Howie Roseman to do what he did this season because he managed to build a roster defensively, that is, with a bunch of young guys that actually made an impact on rookie deals, and not only did they make an impact, they showed that they can actually play in this league over the extent of a season and they can win their matchups. Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, Jalen Hunt, right? Jalen Hunt had a really good Super Bowl, in my opinion. He had a really good second half of the season when BG got hurt, right? So building your roster with those young players is paramount. But when you're a team that doesn't know how to evaluate talent, you rely heavily on free agency. And that's where the overpayment comes in. So so to your point about teams who aren't good, who don't really make good decisions, but they have a lot of money, let's go down some of the list of teams who do have the most money. New England. As of right now, they're projected to have well over, this is a lot of money. They're projected to have well over 120 million in cap space. Las Vegas, the Raiders.
Denver would be an interesting team just because it depends on how they feel about their quarterback. I think that they think they got one.
Denver, so they have about 37.3 million in cap space.
Yeah. So if you think you got one at the quarterback position and he's on a rookie contract, now's the time. You know what I mean?
That's true. The top 10 teams as far as cap space: New England 1, Las Vegas 2, Washington 3, Chicago 4, Arizona 5, Chargers 6, Minnesota 7, Cincinnati 8, Pittsburgh 9, Tennessee 10.
So I'll say Cincinnati's conservative and foolish in the wrong direction, the opposite direction. I'll say that the team that, like Denver, definitely, that's one you kind of got to watch out for. The Raiders are notorious too. That's another organization where I feel like they're trying to make something kind of feel they're trying to force competitiveness there, right? So they might be a team that might try to reach into free agency to drive up some of the, some of that, some of that hype machine, if you will, around them.
Right.
They tried it with Devontae Adams, and they tried a few different things. I still think that they're in purgatory until they figure out a quarterback spot. But that's a team that, with a lot of money and an aggressive front office that I don't think cares if they make mistakes. I think that they're more invested in selling tickets. That's a team I definitely. But I guess you can make the argument is like, how many tickets is Zack Baun selling?
That's a good point. I mean, I personally believe he didn't win Defensive Player of the Year because the lack of notoriety surrounding his name. But the football people still gave him first team All Pro at his position. So that counts for something, right?
Exactly.
It's really going to be interesting to see how Howie Roseman constructs this roster post Super Bowl win, right? And Howie Roseman is
Mhm.
not someone that I anticipate to ever get comfortable. That's not his mentality ever. He's always looking to push the needle in some shape, way, or form, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about it from the Mekhi Becton perspective, right? What's your take on Mekhi Becton's value, the impact he made on his team, and potentially what he could be looking for a free agency? Do you see a team taking a shot on a guy who was a right guard for 1 year, right? Really has 1 year of really good play. The other years are kind of up and down due to injury. How do you gauge Mekhi Becton's value, not only on the open market, but also in Philadelphia?
That's an excellent question. I think it's going to have to start with the evaluation of, do you see him as an interior O lineman or do you see him as a tackle? Because that's a different pay scale.
Exactly.
I
And
think
me
that's
personally, I looked at him as interior, right? At this
yeah.
point in his career, I think it's a shorter distance you have to travel, right? You're not on the island. He's a unicorn at that position because of the size he has and the athleticism.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's the tough part is like it's really difficult because like if you look at so from the run grades, Becton was pretty good. I mean, he wasn't one of the top guys rated there, but if you're watching the internal mechanisms of how our run game worked, Becton was a huge part of it, the physicality that he played with, right? Him and Landon Dickerson and the physicality that those two guys bring, a big part of why we have a lot of success there. Although Landon is highly rated in the run game and Mekhi is rated decently, but he's not like one of the top guys they rated off of PFF. Pass pro was an issue. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. In pass pro, you could tell that he's still learning how to play on the interior. Like I don't think it's a lack of ability. I just think it's a lack of reps there. And there's a lot of communication between the center, understanding how the protections work, understanding how to pick up stunts and twists and things like that. Gains when they run gains on the interior. Like there's definitely some growth that has to happen there. I'll say that, and mind you, I don't think it's because of one player or the other. I think it was the two of them together and growing together. It's going to matter. But I'll tell you right now that the center and the right guard spot were a little bit of a problem in pass protection this year. With that said, you got a guy that was moving from right guard into center who only played a couple years of center in college. You know what I mean? Who's athletically gifted, but is still learning it, and Cam Jurgens.
Right.
And then you got a guy that was a tackle who's playing inside and is a physical specimen at the position, but is still learning how to play differently. Right? He's learning how to play in a phone booth instead of being out there on an island. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference there. So I mean, I think you have to account for like when you look at things like their ability to pass protect, like where do you gauge the growth that'll occur? Because they're both still very young players. Even Mekhi Becton, he's a very young player.
What is he? What, 26?
Yeah, he's a young guy. I mean, lineman can play for 26. He can play another 10 to 12 years potentially. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, this is a guy that has not reached what he's going to be ultimately. I think Mekhi has more value in Philadelphia unless another team is going to put him out at right tackle. I think if a team's going to put him out at right tackle, it changes the value proposition. But if they're going to try to play him at right guard, I think his value is higher in Philadelphia than elsewhere. If I had to take a wild guess, Tone, and you don't know how these things are going to shake out, you know what I mean? You don't know agents. You don't, there's a business side of this that you just don't know how they're looking at it. I would take a wild guess that they're probably more likely to sign Zack Baun and Mekhi Becton than Milton Williams and Josh Sweat.
I agree.
Now, I don't think anyone is ruled out yet. I think it's just going to depend on how it all shakes itself out these next week or two in terms of the talks. I don't think anyone is out of the picture yet. But that's, my gut instinct tells me that Mekhi and Zack Baun are more likely, and you might be able to get a third guy. You might be able to get a Milton Williams. You might be able to get a Josh White, just depending on how it works. It just depends upon like what guys are willing to work with you on the structure of the contract, because it's the structure more than anything that's going to matter. Because you're going to want to basically load as little money on the 2025 year as possible, but picking it up in like 2026 a little bit, but more so 27 or 28. That's where you're going to want to put the money at mostly. So that player's got to work with you. It's all nice and it's all shiny when you say like 4 years and 60 some million, but it's really about how you're going to do that. Yeah, it's the structure, right? That's what makes us so deadly when it comes to contracts. We got an aggressive GM in Howie Roseman, but we got an owner who's willing to spend the money. What people don't realize is if you guarantee money on a contract, it has to be escrowed. Not every owner can escrow that type of money. Simply put. Not every ownership has the ability to do it. And we saw that with
or
Deshaun
the
Watson
desire.
sweepstakes.
There's some ownerships that they can, but they're just cheap.
They won't.
Like
Dallas,
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, yeah.
Yeah, and go ahead, please.
Yeah, but then you talk about like bonus money, like signing bonus money. That's paid to the player up front. And then you're allowed to allocate it over, X amount of years. So like Jeffrey Lurie is really the kind of the key ingredient to how we're able to do these things. And that's what makes it tough to like predict who's going to be here and who's not going to be here. It's really like who's willing to work with us, because I have Milton Williams. You tell me what you think. I have Milton Williams kind of around what Ed Oliver got. I think he's going to get like a 4-year, $68 million deal somewhere in that area with about a 17 AAV. I think they're similar in age when they signed their contracts. I think their talent level is pretty similar. Like that's what I see. Like that's the type of contract I see for him. Now I know some people are like, I don't know, man, but how the heck did Javon Hargrave, get 20 AAV? And it's like it's because he had this like where Milton got mostly the pressure numbers, Javon got the sack numbers. And I think that sometimes these guys get caught up a little bit in the stat chasing. And I think that's what drove it.
How much stock do you put into this notion? I think about Mekhi Becton, right? His career with the New York Jets and how things didn't really go too well for him over there, especially with the medical staff. He had a hard time staying healthy, had a hard time staying on the football field. Things just didn't really go well. He gets to Philadelphia. He gets with the Eagles coaching staff. He gets with the Eagles medical staff, right? Stoutland U, right? Infamous for what they're able to do for guys' careers. Mekhi Becton gets with Stoutland U, turns his career around, turns him into a starting level right guard. You mentioned some of the pros and cons of him playing right guard, but for the most part, and how the Philadelphia Eagles play, he was an asset. So Stoutland was able to turn him into a starting level guard, right? And he was able to stay healthy for the most part. He had his little nicks, but he stayed healthy for the most part for the first time in his career. Then you get to Zack Baun, right? A guy who gets to Philadelphia, gets under Vic Fangio and Bobby King, and was able to take his game to another level. He was able to develop all of those guys over the course of the season. The Kobe Dean, same thing. And then when it comes to the Milton Williams and the Clint Hurt connection, right? Clint Hurt was able to have these guys playing well above board, right? He had these guys conditioning. Vic Fangio as well had this team's conditioning in tip-top shape. And guys, again, were healthy for the most part. What I'm trying to get to is how much will these players consider where they earn their bones versus where they can be successful elsewhere, right? I know I'm wording that kind of funny, but I've always felt like if I've personally achieved a lot of my success under this leadership, under these people around me, I want to try to sustain that because I know that may sustain my career. And I could probably still get my money too. I still want to be successful at what I'm doing. I don't just want to have the money and not be good. I mean, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm being, maybe it's a fairy tale in my mind. But what's your thoughts on that dynamic? Coach's impact on how guys sign where they go.
Yeah, I mean, if you see a particular coaching staff, a particular organization keeps getting guys paid, I mean, come on, man. If you're in that position, you got to be crazy not to take a chance there, right? I mean, we can talk about this. Javon Hargrave was a somewhat sought after guy in the 2020 free agency class, but nothing like he was sought after in 2023, right? When he went to San Francisco. I mean, he made some bank off of coming to Philadelphia for those few years, right? I mean, you take a look at a guy like Milton Williams, homegrown talent. I'm over here talking on the conservative side. I'm saying he's probably going to get 4 years and like 68 million, somewhere around 17 AAV. It depends if he's going to sign a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year deal. That'll swing the total number, the 68 figure, but the AAV is probably going to be 17, 18 million. You look at it, and if I'm an interior D lineman, and I know that I was just in a bad situation, but I like the way that the Eagles, Vic Fangio, Clint Hurt, I like the way that the scheme works. I'm going to give the Eagles leadway that I won't give other organizations, just simply put. And we saw that happen. Saquon could have taken more money. He didn't, because other teams don't have Jeff Stoutland in this Philadelphia Eagles offensive line and Jalen Hurts.
That's a good point.
The
combination of AJ Brown and Smitty and Goddard. You had that very rare combination of athleticism, physicality, blocking ability with your receivers and your tight ends. The quarterback can do what he can do. The offensive line. You raise a very good point.
Other teams couldn't make the deal we made with Saquon. He was going to want more money from them. You know what I mean? They didn't have the same packaging.
Interesting. That's
And
really
I
interesting.
think that's the thing is like if I'm an interior D lineman and I know that I'm a good pass rusher, but I'm not going to survive in this particular scheme that I'm playing in currently because teams are just turning their focus towards me. But I look over at Philadelphia and they got Jalen Carter. Oh, I'm signing in Philly. Like, I mean,
he makes life easy.
Yeah, like I mean, look at Javon Hargrave. How much of Javon Hargrave's success was due to him just being a really good pass rusher, which he was, but also because teams just could not just turn Fletcher Cox loose.
Right. So that may impact Milton Williams' value on the market. They may say, "Hey, look, you had a career year, but you were also playing next to Jalen Carter as well."
Yeah, like what, like a half a sack the year before?
Yeah, right. I mean, makes a big difference.
Exactly.
Makes a big difference.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I like Milton Williams a lot. I think he's a really good player. I think he's a better player than Javon Hargrave, to be honest.
Really?
I think Javon was more sudden off the line of scrimmage when it came to the pass rush stuff. I saw Javon absolutely whoop dudes when they went one-on-one in the pass rush drills. But I will say that in terms of like not only just being a pass rusher, but also being able to defend the run and do the things that Milton Williams can do, I think he was a better overall player, to be quite honest.
And I think Milton is just more violent with his hands. I mean, you tell me different, but Milton Williams just seems to me just more violent out there. Again, this goes back to what Vic Fangio was able to do with these guys and just develop them and put them in position to be successful, right? You know, I want to talk a little bit deeper because I know you say you used to coach cornerbacks at one point, right? When you think about Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean's rise throughout the course of this season, how they've had to deal with some pretty difficult matchups, right? There were moments throughout the season where Quinyon had to deal with, Christian Watson when he was healthy, right? Romeo Doubs, he had to deal with Drake London, right? He had to deal with Terry McLaurin, right? That was a hell of a matchup for him throughout the season. I would say he has the 2-1 edge over Scary Terry, right? The first matchup he got him, second matchup Terry got him. Then obviously in the NFC Championship, Scary Terry really didn't have an impact on his side of the field. But again, Vic Fangio, his impact on just developing these young guys, the rookies, second, third year guys, Cooper, Quinyon, Jalix Hunt, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, right? All those guys, man. How did he make it happen? Again, his scheme, like you said, is really complicated. And a lot of these guys just want to react. But when you're as talented as those guys are, and you're able to also learn that system, that's a deadly proposition for the opposing team.
Absolutely it is. It has a lot to do with like, and I'll give you an example of this. We heard this report come out about Jalen Hurts, right? Part of the reason the Eagles were so high on Jalen Hurts in the 2020 draft is that where everyone was focusing on the Wonderlic test, the Eagles were running a spatial recognition test. And they said that Jalen Hurts scored really high on that spatial recognition. It's kind of similar when you're dealing with defensive backs, especially inside of like a Vic Fangio match carry type system, where you're playing two-high structure that rotates into single high or vice versa. It can look like it's single high, then you rotate into two high. You have to know how to space yourself on the field, right? Because you are covering essentially spaces on the field. You have a duty within that space. When I was evaluating the tape on these guys, the thing I said to them is that I made 4 videos on the draft class last year, and 2 of the 4 guys I covered, one was Cooper DeJean and one was Quinyon Mitchell. Right. And I said both of these guys, in my opinion, have what I would call zone eyes. And the 2 young men from Alabama, I covered both of those guys as well. And I said they're coming from a similar scheme, but it's a Saban scheme. And they're running like their concepts are different because they're playing more man techniques within the system than what we see from like a Kirby Smart type system, which is similar in the structure, but it relies a little bit more on zone. Now, the reason Kirby Smart runs more of the zone is Kirby Smart didn't have the same athletes. Nick Saban's doing it, and he's playing more of the man concepts within that structure because he's got better athletes. Well, when you got Darius Slay, you got Quinyon Mitchell, and you got Cooper DeJean, guess what you got? You got guys with zone eyes and athletic profiles.
and that's what's unique about those 2 guys, right? In particular, Coop and Quinyon, they not only had the zone eyes like you mentioned, right? Because one of the things they spoke about with Quinyon is how he really can thrive in those zone situations. Not saying he can't play man, but
Yeah.
he really can attack the ball. He's really disciplined in that way. Cooper DeJean, same thing. This was one of those rare times where fit and best player available collided.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. Like, and you knew it was something in the air because like they had already drafted Quinyon. And they're sitting there watching as Cooper DeJean keeps falling, and they got this crazy grade on this young man. And they're watching this man keep falling and falling and falling. And finally, Howie's like, look, what does it take for me to get up to 40? Like, what is it going to take me to get to that spot?
Right.
Like, I got to get this young man. I got to put this young man here. I got a coaching staff yelling in my ear right now that this is the dude that's going to make a difference. And we saw what happened after the bye week, Tone. I love Avonte Maddox. I think Avonte Maddox gets a bad rap, but something athletically has been lost with Avonte Maddox over the course of these injuries. Avonte Maddox is not the same player from like 3 or 4 years ago when he was probably one of the better nickel corners in the league at that point. Something was missing. Still good player, good backup, can give you some safety help, can give you some nickel help. If you're really up the creek without the paddle, he can play outside for you. Not ideal. It's not what we want, but he can do it. He's a really good kind of like off the bench type player, and he played a role in the Super Bowl, had a pretty good pass breakup.
Yeah, 4th down. Crucial.
Yeah. But like you saw immediately how the defense changed when Quinyon was out there on the edge, and then you brought Cooper DeJean in at the nickel with Slay and with Isaiah Rodgers. Like immediately things changed from the coverage perspective. Like you could tell that this team was it was playing differently.
Is it fair
right
to say
away,
that
you
Coop,
could tell?
Is it fair to say that Coop, and we love Jalen Carter, right? But is it fair to say Coop became the most valuable asset on defense because of the stark difference in how he was able to impact that defense?
It's up there. I would still probably say Jalen Carter is probably the more important piece to it, just because he affects the blocking scheme.
Okay.
And the time to develop the plays for an offense. But Coop's up there. Coop's up there in the importance, man. He's one of the top 3 dudes on that defense in terms of their importance.
So Carter more valuable front end, Coop most valuable back end. Is that fair?
Him and CJ, in my opinion. I think him and CJ are difference makers inside of the secondary. And I love Reed Blankenship, and I love Darius Slay, and I love Quinyon. I think those guys together, that secondary together, and it just sucks that Darius Slay can't help the fact of what his age is. It sucks he's 35 at this point, bro.
I know he's thinking to himself, oh my God, if I was 5 years younger with these guys.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Man, if this was the secondary that was here in 2020 when he got traded to us, if you had Quinyon, if you had Darius Slay, if you had CJ GJ, if you had Reed Blankenship, if you had Cooper DeJean, and you had 5 years of those dudes together, this would be a dominant secondary. An absolutely dominant secondary, especially just because of the depth behind them. Kaylee Ringo is still a good depth player, good special teamer, a guy you can actually put out there and he'll actually fight for you if you got to play him on defensive snaps, right? Yeah. Isaiah Rodgers can do it. He's good enough. Like you just look at what they got back here, man. Like I'm not ready to give up on Sidney Brown. I still think there's something there with Sidney Brown.
I agree.
Like I think that this is a really freaking good secondary. It sucks because I'm running in my head. I'm like, yo, if Jim Johnson would have had this defense, on one hand it's Jim Johnson, it's not Vic Fangio, and it's like I don't know. You know, I like not Jim Johnson, Jim Schwartz.
Jim Schwartz.
Yeah, I like Jim Schwartz. I think Jim Schwartz was underrated when he was here, but I don't put Jim Schwartz in the same category as Vic Fangio. That's the thing. But I do wonder, like, damn, bro, if Doug had this type of defense to carry him through the offensive struggles, would Doug still be here?
That's a good question, man, because Howie Roseman has truly developed as a GM over the course of the years, right? And, you know, a lot of people like to say, well, you know, he didn't do this for Carson. He didn't do this for Doug. You know, he didn't do this for, you know, and my thing is, right, he had to, all those decisions he made prior led him to this moment. He wasn't who he was back then. He was overthinking things. You know, he was trying to be the smartest guy in the room sometimes, right? Like you have to develop as a human. You have to develop as a leader. You have to develop in your position. And it's so lazy to say, oh, well, if Carson Wentz had all these guys, right, Carson Wentz would have been able to do what he did. And it's like, it's not that the game is never that simple. These people, these humans have to develop in their roles, and they have to learn from their mistakes. And we don't get Quinyon Mitchell, we don't get Cooper DeJean, we don't get Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, we don't get Devontae Smith, in my humble opinion, without that Jalen Reagor fuck up. I'm sorry. That draft had to happen the way it needed to happen for us to get here. That's just my humble opinion.
And to be fair to Howie, he did try. I mean, he legitimately tried to get Jim Schwartz the secondary pieces. Like, he got him Malcolm Jenkins. You know,
that's true.
They had Rodney McLeod, who was a really good safety.
Jalen Mills.
They went after Rasul Douglas in that draft. They went after what's his name? Came here same draft as Rasul.
Sidney Jones.
Injured. Sidney Jones, yeah.
Sidney
Jones, like he tried. He tried to do it. Now, I thought they always played a little too loosely at the linebacker position. But, I mean, there was a period of time when they had Michael Kendricks. There was a period of time, like, you know what I mean? Like, they had Nigel Bradham. They had some bona fide dudes out there. I don't think any of those dudes were quite to the level of TJ Edwards, and they definitely weren't to what we saw from Zack Baun.
Right.
But, like, he did try to put those pieces there for them, right? I mean, the Jalen Reagor draft pick was him listening to his coaches. You know, Monty Reagor had a relationship with the Eagles. You know, Monty Reagor had that relationship with the Philadelphia Eagles front office. He had a relationship with Aaron Moorhead, the wide receiver coach. And, you know, they were beating the table. They were pounding the table to get Jalen Reagor. To be fair, I knew Reagor's statistical underlying was a little sketchy. It just, you know, he didn't have those numbers you look for from the college production per se. But like, it's like, okay, he had a lot of weirdness at the quarterback position over there at Texas Tech. Like, he had a lot of weirdness there, to be fair to him. So like, it was TCU. We kept writing it off, right? To say like, yeah, there were some, you know, some reasons why this wasn't right. And the underarching thing was like, just like Jalen, you know, they wanted to throw the ball outside the numbers and deep, vertical. So that's why they were going after him. You know what I mean? I did make a video though, and I was looking at the tape, and I saw Justin Jefferson's tape, and Justin Jefferson was the only receiver to this day I've ever made 2 videos during the draft period. He's the only guy I've ever made 2 videos during the draft period about, was Justin Jefferson. And I told everybody, I like Reagor. Justin Jefferson's better. Straightforward. He's the better player.
It felt like an easy decision, but you know, things obviously happen the way they happen, right? Again, what Howie's been able to do, you know, and I spoke about this even prior to the draft, right? Prior to last year's draft, I said, I think I want to kind of remake or remix what the Chiefs did when they beat us in the Super Bowl. They had a bunch of young guys in that defense, and they were coached well by a veteran guy, and we kind of emulated that in our own way, you know, drafting the guys we did and having Vic Fangio in the building. And then the offensive side, you bring in Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore is known to be this passing guy, but he finds a way to just evolve his thinking and say, you know what, our personnel dictates this. We're way more dominant when we put the ball on the ground, and we can play off that play action and the RPOs and things like that. You know, take our shots down the field. We're not going to overcomplicate this offense. We're way too talented to overcomplicate it, right? But now Kellen Moore is gone, and you bring in a guy, or you elevate a guy like Kevin Patullo, who's been here since the beginning of the Nick SIrianni era. He's been Nick's right-hand man, one of the only guys to survive the chopping block from last year's debacle. When you think about Kevin Patullo's elevation or promotion to OC, how did you react to it when the news came across the wire? Because a lot of fans were very split on it. Some people felt like, hey, we don't know too much about the guy. Give him a shot, right? How do you become great if you don't get the opportunity, right? Sean McVay wasn't who he was until he got the opportunity. But there were also some people who just felt like, nah, we needed to go outside of the building. We needed someone with more experience. And my retort to that was, well, Brian Johnson had experience play calling on the college level, and look where he ended up, right? So it's not an exact science, but I want to know your thought process on when Kevin Patullo got the promotion.
I wasn't really shocked. I mean, it seemed like a pretty likely outcome. I'd made some tweets, and I kind of put out there, like, you know, internal candidates. And I said, the Eagles are either going to have to promote Doug Nussmeier, or he's probably going to get taken by Kellen. I would think the Eagles will have the upper hand, though, because if they promoted Doug Nussmeier, that means he's a play caller. If he goes with Kellen, Kellen has to relinquish play calling for that to be effective. And I said the other internal candidate is probably Kevin Patullo. to be quite honest. He's Nick's right-hand man. It is kind of what it is. He's the associate head coach. He knows how to run the room. And obviously, Jalen's weighing in on these things. So I don't know if it's because Jalen just really likes Kevin Patullo. I don't know the nature of their relationship, or if it's just like Jalen's like, look, man, I don't want to have to go through like a complete overhaul again. Like, I want a guy that knows Kellen's system and knows Nick's system and, can bring his own little flavor here and there. And we're not completely rewriting everything. If I had to take a guess, that's more so what it was. So that's why I was trying to look at guys that would have been similar in the tree. But like when I was looking at the names, I was like, oh man, like, yeah, there's not a lot of similarities in the tree. Like, you have these system play callers. So New England, has its own particular system that's been installed since the 70s. And it's what Tom Brady ran, and they just recently departed from it. And that's the Earhart-Perkins system. That's a little bit of what we see here with Jalen Hurts. Like, you do see some elements of that. It's a quarterback-centric power run game kind of system. It's what they ran with Brady all those years. Now, the Earhart-Perkins in New England went through many, many changes, from 21 personnel dominant to 11 personnel dominant to 12 personnel dominant. You know what I mean? Like, to a Brady-esque run offense, to where basically Brady was making the calls at the line of scrimmage, essentially. Like, you get those kind of elements to it, right? Dallas. So Dallas, when you go through their history, they ran more of the Air Coryell system, and it's more a language base. Was the Air Coryell, and that's where the Clapper, Jason Garrett, and those guys all came up through. Was the Air Coryell approach? That was a long-standing thing with Dallas. They had Zampese there in the 90s. Zampese ran their stuff, and then even the Greatest Show on Turf, once Mike Martz kind of, took over there and took over for Dick Vermeil, Mike Martz brought in Zampese and his son to help them run that with Kurt Warner. So just to give you guys a heads up of where that structure system comes from, that's kind of some of where Kellen's coming from. Kellen kind of partially comes from that system, but he also kind of comes from a background in running was it Bailey, or I can't remember who it was. They had, let me take a look real quick, guys. 2018 OC Dallas. They had an old school system there, an old school guy. You see, yeah, Scott Linehan. So Linehan and Nussmeier. Nussmeier was Linehan's quarterback in college.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And then Nussmeier and Kellen were there with Linehan. And then when Linehan got replaced, Kellen comes up through it. So like Kellen has a weird kind of branch. I don't know that he ideologically belonged to anything. And then you mix in the West Coast stuff coming in from, Mike McCarthy. You know what I mean? Like, Kellen's system was a little different. I think he was always a little bit malleable, easily to be shaped. You know what I mean? Like, he could shape his system however he kind of wanted to. But like, Dallas in itself kind of comes out of that Zampese kind of Air Coryell style stuff. So when you get to the Phillies, it's unique. It's unique here with Jalen Hurts. And this is the quote that makes me laugh. All right, you ready for this? This is one I see on the internet all the time, Tone. I chuckle every time I see it. 15 other quarterbacks could have won the Super Bowl with this roster.
That
bullshit.
kills me, honestly.
Bullshit. No, they couldn't. The system matters. The system matters. Like, get out of here with that crap.
That kills me, Gates, honestly, because not just the system mattering. I feel like people underestimate the mental aspect of this game, the intangibles, right, that are required to not only play in Philadelphia, but run this offense, right? What Jalen Hurts has been able to do in Philadelphia, he's been able to elevate his game in big moments, where a lot of these guys who they consider more talented than him have not been able to do that, right? I was talking to my man, Laura Brunson, about this, and I told him straight up, I said, I would much rather have, and this is just me just trying to use a metaphor here, but I would much rather have a B+ quarterback that can elevate his game to A+ in big games than rather have an A+ quarterback that shrinks to B+ in big games. That's just me. And 100%. Again, that's not me trying to disparage Jalen Hurts or where he stands, but they consider a lot of these guys to be better than him. But he's outperformed them in the biggest of moments. He hasn't laid an egg in big moments. He's done his job to the highest degree in these big moments. And you put all these other guys in front of him, and it blows my mind that they try to say, oh yeah, I know 15 quarterbacks are going to win with this team. How so? It's catered around his skill set.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, I'll give you this. If Josh Allen isn't making a critical mistake, that's not a guarantee that he won't, because I'm sorry, go to the AFC Championship game. In the first half of that game, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn in that game. He should have been picked off like 3 times on the first 2 possessions.
And then they fumbled like 3 or 4 times, but they happened
Yeah,
to recover them all.
like Josh Allen, I love him. He's talented, but the dude makes critical mistakes that shouldn't be made. Like, talent wise, okay, I could see the argument that, if the circumstances line up and fate's 100%, sure. Patrick Mahomes is crazy uber talented. If you give him this kind of coaching staff with this kind of front office, with this kind of offensive line, like, yeah, of course. But like, dude, you start getting into some pretty questionable territory when you're talking about the Dak Prescotts and these dudes. Dak's a really fundamentally sound quarterback, but for whatever reason, when the lights get bright, it ain't clicked. It hasn't clicked, man.
And that's a real thing. That's a very real thing. Same thing with Justin Herbert. Yeah, he's talented as they come. But we all saw that wild card game against the Texans. He looked like a practice squad quarterback.
Yeah.
Like, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, he does. He's not good. Sorry, man. Again.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's just I look at some of these guys that they claim is more talented than him, and the comparisons they make. I'm saying to myself, this game, this NFL product is so much more than just being the most talented guy, being able to run the fastest, having the biggest arm. Oh, I can throw a football over the mountains. No, it's more than that. It's more than that.
Look at Tua. Tua's got 2 of the fastest receivers in the league, but it doesn't change the fact that Tua still struggles to push the ball downfield. Like, I mean, I'm sorry. Tua doesn't have the strongest arm. He's good. He can read a defense. He can get the ball out quickly. He can process and read fast. Still limited. He's limited. He can't push the ball vertically. He's predicated on those dudes getting open and getting open fast. Like, to be quite honest about the situation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And again, the guys they compare Jalen Hurts to, and that's why I kind of like. Again, I get so frustrated with it because Jalen Hurts, did he come in being the most highly touted quarterback in his draft class? No. Out of those top 5 guys that were taken out of his draft class, or the quarterbacks that we acknowledge from that 2020 draft class, he has the most playoff wins out of all of them. I think he has the most career wins total out of all of them. But a lot of people say, hey, well, if I had A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, I'd be winning a lot too. And my thing is, he still has to throw the ball to those guys. Those guys have had A.J. Brown in particular has had his best years with Jalen Hurts throwing him the football, right? So just as much as they're helping him, they're benefiting from him being able to do his job. A.J. Brown was on millions of dollars worth of game, and he said, they were talking about how just A.J. Brown was talking about how he was drafted to play baseball by the Padres, and he said one of the reasons he went back to football is because the way that the speed at which that baseball was coming. He was like, I was used to hitting 85, 84. I start seeing 90s, 95. I'm like, oh, okay, let me go back to playing football. That's my thing.
Yeah.
And then,
brings your hands.
Right, exactly. And then Gillian and Wallow, they were saying how, listen, that football comes at you pretty fast too. He said, yeah, but there are a lot of guys, different guys throw the ball different ways. There are a lot of guys that really put a lot of heat on it. He said Jalen likes to throw with a lot of touch. He throws a very catchable football. And my thing is, I want a guy who throws the most catchable football, who throws the football the furthest, or who throws the football the sharpest. I want a guy who throws the most catchable football.
Yeah, Brett Favre was out there breaking receivers' fingers, but he also was breaking defensive backs' fingers, throwing all them picks.
I'm saying, man. So I'm saying, so that Kevin Patullo, Jalen Hurts relationship is going to be interesting to see develop, because again, he knows Jalen. He's seen Jalen develop from year one, and I just think, like you said, it was the easiest transition, especially when you're late in the game. Most of the hires have been taken. Kevin Patullo knows the system, knows the personnel, knows the building, right? The players know him. And also, he got the seal of approval from guys like A.J. Brown and Lane Johnson. That's good enough for me right now. And it just kills me when people try to pretend like they know the science behind this guy. And it's just like, yo, come on. Like, hiring guys, there's no guarantee a successful college coach is going to come in here and do a good job. There's no guarantee. Yeah. Yeah,
it's interesting to me, like, because when you talk about Kevin Patullo, it's just tough to judge it because you just don't know. Like, I'm not going to be over praiseworthy about the hire, nor am I going to be over critical about it just because we don't know. He's never been in the position before. So it's a lot of uncertainty, right? Like we don't know how he's going to react to it. I mean, as you stated earlier, I mean, everyone's got to get their start somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Got to get stuff somehow.
If not this opportunity, then when? Like when the team is just a crapshoot and you know what I'm saying? Like the ship's going down, we're just going to throw a guy in there and see, because that's how, to be fair, that's how Shane Steichen got his start. Anthony Lynn was going down. The ship was going down, man. And then basically Anthony Lynn was gone and they moved Shane Steichen and gave him a chance to work with Herbert at the end of it. And then he had a full year the next year to work with Herbert. And, they still decided to move in a different direction. Yeah. Frank Reich. Frank Reich was was an NFL quarterback, good player, good backup, I should say. But Frank Reich, he had to get his start calling plays somewhere. Someone had to give him the opportunity. It's just tough because like when you're in that situation, I do think that some people tend to overvalue calling plays. I really wished I could take some of the people who think that this is like such a scientific thing to call in plays. I'm almost tempted to take another coaching position and just to bring them with me, just to let them see a play sheet and see how it actually works, just so they can see like, man, most of the stuff is predetermined during the week.
Right.
Like it's not as difficult as people want to make it out to be.
Right.
Like if you're failing as a play caller, it's more than likely you're failing during the week of preparation, to be quite honest. Now, I'm not going to say that people don't have a magical touch to the feel of the game. There are people that do, but it's not as difficult as people want to make it out to be. Most of the time, you're going to fail off of a lack of proper preparation for the week. So your advanced scouting was crap, or you're going to fail because of execution and personnel. The other team's just better than you. Like just straightforward.
Yeah. It's just that simple. The way team's built.
I mean, like if you give me a good enough team, I mean, you can give me a crappy play caller. They're probably going to win a lot of games. Like, you know what I mean?
That's a good point. And every coach says, "Hey, listen, you want to you want to show me a good coach? Well, show me their players." Simple as that. I get frustrated again. I get frustrated when people try to pretend like the Eagles are doing something abnormal. Just coach better, develop better. Tell your GM to be better at his job. Tell your GM and your staff to be better at constructing contracts, right? A lot of people like to act like the Philadelphia Eagles have access to this secret well of the cap space that no one knows about. And it's like, no, try harder. Try harder. Howie Roseman made it very clear when Jalen Hurts became the starter or leading up to that season with him starting, he said to himself, or just based off the decisions, he said, okay, I got this young quarterback that I'm giving a shot here. Let me at least give him a fair shake at this. I'm going to draft the receiver, Devontae Smith. I'm going to draft the offensive lineman, Landon Dickerson. Give him a fair shot. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then you saw what he did with it. Okay, let's try to add a little bit more to that. All right, let's trade for A.J. Brown. Everybody had a chance. Everybody had a chance at Smitty. Everybody had a chance at A.J. Brown. Everybody had a chance at Saquon Barkley. Everybody had a chance at Landon Dickerson. They all had a chance at Mekhi Becton. They all had a chance at Jordan Mailata, right? The bottom line is they had a chance at Dallas Goedert, but y'all didn't choose them. You didn't construct your roster the way you did. And they love to say, oh, Jalen Hurts had a super team. These guys were developed over the course of years. Landon Dickerson was developed. Devontae Smith was developed, right? On offense, there are two pieces that you obviously there were obvious home runs when you brought him in. But at the time, people gave up on him. Saquon Barkley, they said he was washed. They said that. We signed him all of a sudden. Oh, no, you guys got a super team. But when we made all these moves going into the season, they said that I got the Eagles not even making the playoffs, not even winning their division. This is after the moves already made. But now, all of a sudden, we won a Super Bowl, super team. Anybody could have won with this roster. Well, y'all said the guy we had on the roster couldn't win with this roster before the season started. So which is it now?
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding too about the way like Lonely Bee. I see your comments in there. Just I'm trying to talk with Tone. That's why I'm not really tracking the chat like that, Tone, and Lonely. But Lonely, the only pushback I would give you in terms of like talking about Trent Dilfer and talking about like the Tampa Bay teams is when Tampa Bay won their Super Bowl, John Gruden was the coach. John Gruden runs a West Coast system. John Gruden does not give leadway to his quarterbacks at the line of scrimmage. They're told where to go by their drops with the ball and their progressions. So systems matter. It's more controlled by the offensive coordinator. John Gruden was the more the defining factor in that run than their quarterback play was, like Brad Johnson and those guys. With Baltimore, a little different. They did have a 2,000-yard back. They had pretty much one of the greatest defenses ever. Like, structurally, I can understand where you're coming from and saying like Baltimore was built similarly to Philly and how they won it. But once again, you're getting into the structure of the way that you play conceptually in terms of your system. And Jalen Hurts is playing more so in an Erhardt-Perkins style, system to where quarterbacks have more leeway at the line of scrimmage. Hence the reason, even though Tom Brady hadn't thrown for 4,000 yards in his first 3 or 4 years in the league, they were hoisting Lombardis. They were hoisting Lombardis to a solid run game, a power run game at that. And they had guys out there that were really underrated. Like people like to say, like, oh, he didn't have A.J. Brown. He didn't have Devontae Smith. No, he had a 30-year-old Troy Brown who was playing two ways, corner and playing as a wide receiver, and was pretty much on trajectory to be an all-pro at the cornerback position, playing two ways in his 30s. His 30s. Like, that's how good of a player he was, man. He was an incredibly good player. So like the system and scheme sometimes gets left out of that stuff. That's when I say I laugh at people when they say that 15 other quarterbacks could have done that. No, they couldn't. No, they couldn't, man. The scheme and the system matter.
It's not a video game. It's not plug and play. The NFL is one of those sports that's not plug and play. It's rare you have a situation where someone just plugs in and just changes everything, right? But this game, I get so frustrated with it. Like this game, I feel like you're low key disrespecting the game when people talk like that.
Yeah,
it's so much more nuanced than just have the best players and you win. It's not like the game doesn't work like that.
Just like the secret sauce in Kansas City. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Pat Mahomes isn't like a world talent. He is. He's still playing in a West Coast system with spread elements. And there's a two-parted way there. On one hand, it's a West Coast system. Andy Reid defines where the ball goes. On the other hand, it is Pat Mahomes. And when he goes off schedule, it's special. Like it's complex, man. It's not a black and white issue. Like you get what I'm saying? Like, there's all kinds of gray in these schemes and like the way that they work, right? Like that's the thing that's kind of hard. Like go back to the Super Bowl. Pat Mahomes' toughness and his ability to elude the rush was a big reason why the Chiefs could come back. But let's be real. Those touchdowns were produced by Andy Reid, not Pat Mahomes. Andy leaned into the running game in the second half, and then he started creating space for his receivers by motion and movement. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, there's so much gray in these things, guys, to be quite honest. Pat Mahomes, world class, right? You look at Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, super, super good quarterback, man. Really sees the field well. Also running a West Coast scheme. It's dictated by the offensive coordinator. Now, can Joe Burrow be on the same page with that offensive coordinator and take it to another level? Of course. Like there's the gray area there. But West Coast systems, you can literally tell by the drop where the ball should be, where the steps are on the balls. You can listen to some of the old school guys like Bill Walsh and them talk about it, and they can tell you by the footwork where the ball is supposed to be in a West Coast system. It's super defined by the offensive coordinator. When you get to like an Erhardt-Perkins system, that's a little bit more quarterback, leveraged. That's the quarterback reading things a little bit more. That's the quarterback being able to have autonomy at the line of scrimmage more. That's why you have these subsets of the system, guys. So when you hear like the Gulf Coast or you hear the Texas Coast, those are, or even the Shanahan system, those are variations of the West Coast system. And each of those systems are different. So the Shanahan system, the quarterbacks really have no autonomy at all. It's completely McVay and Shanahan. Those dudes are they're running everything. Now, obviously, I think McVay has had to recant a little bit there. He's had to relinquish a little control to a guy like Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, of course.
But nonetheless, like I guarantee you, Stafford has never had a coordinator or coach who's basically the coordinator as driven in terms of like is involved in the offense with him. When you get to like, the Texas Coast and the Gulf Coast stuff, that's when they're devolving some of the power back to the quarterback a little bit, right? Dak gets a little bit more autonomy at the line of scrimmage than like a rookie quarterback in the West Coast system would. Like he's going to get a little bit more autonomy there to do things. So you get these variations of the scheme, but the scheme you play in does matter when you're judging the performance of the quarterback. Like many of those touchdowns in the postseason that Saquon Barkley scored, Jalen audibled the play. Like
Right. He
Jalen got
created
them
he
into the
created
right
those
play.
opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, like you heard Brady speak about it, guys. Brady said, if you want to judge quarterback plays, stop judging these fancy passes that are like 1% of throws in the NFL and judge whether or not the quarterback is getting the offense into the correct play.
Pre-snap.
Yeah,
Tom Brady
that's really
was a
where the beauty is.
pre-snap king. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's been the biggest jump, in my opinion, in Jalen Hurts' career, at least going into this season, right? Especially when he's been asked to maybe throw less, and really just make the right decisions at the line of scrimmage and put the ball in the right people's hands at the right time. I feel like that's been his biggest development, right? It's funny, he did less but developed so much more than he ever has because he's had so much more autonomy at the line of scrimmage, and he's had to really read these defenses and say, okay, this is a situation where I have to give Saquon the ball. Okay, this is a situation where I got to take my shot here. He's had to be really disciplined in this offense and had to exercise a really he had to really stretch his level of self-control and put his ego to the side. But again, I think it helped his development, especially pre-snap, for the better. Let me ask you this about Jalen Hurts, though. Again, he's developed a lot over the course of his career since 2020. No, it's not even a debate or a conversation in regards to how much he's developed. Right, 2 different quarterbacks from year 1 to now. What do you think? What do you think is the one thing or the one part of Jalen Hurts' game that requires more development going into his next season? What do you think is the next step in Jalen Hurts' development as the franchise quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles now that he's a Super Bowl champion?
So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to add a disclaimer. The disclaimer is, guys, unless you're in the actual meeting rooms, you don't know fully the protection calls. But I will say that there have been instances where somebody is wrong in protection. Either the center and the right guard are not this is what I'm going to say, guys. When you fan, you normally see this kind of motion. That means fan. You're fanning the protection. Okay. There was a play to where they had basically a weird setup to where like they were asking Saquon to block 2 players. So instead of fanning the protection, they asked Saquon to basically pick up the most dangerous guy, and Saquon went outside when then they. Mekhi just basically releases the guy on the inside, and then they're right on top of Jalen. So I don't like in that situation. There's so much gray that like I don't want Pamela, Miss Hurts. I don't want you coming after me. So
she ain't got no problem pressing you. I love it though. I love it.
Yeah, because I don't really know. I'm not in the meeting room. I don't know exactly like what's being done there. But structurally, something is wrong. Like structurally, we got to be a little better there. Like there's a lot that's improved. I'm super proud of what Jalen was able to do. He's been able to get us into the right play, but there are some moments there where it's like, oh boy, like I don't care if you got a hot call, with a quick out to a receiver or whatever. It ain't gonna matter, man. If pressure is coming up in your face immediately through the middle, like you just no time to get to a hot read like that. There's just no way. Structurally, there's some things like that it's got to be better. And it happened quite a bit to where you would see the center do this weird thing with his arms. And it is something that they're teaching them. But I was always wondering myself, and I haven't had a chance to talk to some of the guys in our community, like my guy, Caleb Brennan. He's a former center, played for, I think it was Southern Charleston. Jalen Williams played for Virginia State. Those guys like that. Jalen Williams, my guy, DJ, my guy DJ. DJ, former nose tackle, knows a lot about the line of scrimmage play. I wanted to ask them why they didn't why the hell weren't we fanning the protection there? like as a quarterback, I want you to fan there, bro. Like we need to fan the protection here, man. Like I don't want immediate pressure in my face. I can handle the guy coming from the outside. Like why are we not fanning the protection here? Like I wanted to know that, and that's something I don't know.
Yeah, you noticed some things on the interior, especially in that NFC Championship game when, Landon came in first for Cam, and Landon started dealing with the knee, and you saw Landon kind of just throwing his arms out, trying to occupy space, but it seemed it didn't look pretty at all. And Cam, you saw the difference. Obviously, Cam was dealing with the back, but you just saw the difference in how he handled that situation. Yeah. So I guess, how much of it do you put on just the the newness of that interior, right? This is the first season those combination of three guys have played together, right? And then on top of that, you throw it in that Mekhi Becton is a new guard.
Mm-hmm.
Cam Jurgens, first time starting in NFL center, played center in college, but he was a right guard the season prior. Landon Dickerson had to go back and forth between center and left guard in that game, right? So, yeah, and then Tyler Steen came in a few times. That interior was the most banged up in comparison to the tackles throughout the season, but they've played most of the games. How much of it do you put on just the shuffleboard of it all and on the interior and the lack of experience those guys playing together?
A lot. And you can add Saquon to that mix too. Like, I don't know who's at fault for it.
Gotcha.
I don't know if it was Jalen not setting the protection correctly. I don't know if Jalen is calling the protection and, the center and the right guard being new at these positions aren't picking it up correctly. I don't know if it was Saquon missing the call in the protection. I don't know where the blame falls. I just know that something didn't go right there. I can't legitimately say like it's this person's fault, but I know between those guys, something went right. Something didn't go right there. That's why, like, I would love to have like Jalen and Caleb and like my guy DJ. I'd like to have those guys like show them the plays, plug it in, and just ask them from their perspective what went wrong. Walk us through it, man. Walk us through it as guys that played down in the trenches. Like, what happened here? What is Saquon doing? Why didn't we fan the protection here? Like, what happened? Like, those guys would probably have better answers for the structure of the offense and like kind of what the expectations are. They probably could give a little bit more insight because they're especially a guy like Jalen who played left guard, and then you got a guy like Caleb. Caleb played center. Those guys they understand it more. They understand those calls a little bit better.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead.
So I just got a couple more for you, Gates. You gave me a lot of your time today, man. I'm really grateful for it. Make sure you guys continue to smash that like button. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the Chalk It Up Network. You guys are tuned into Chalk It Up Sports, where no matter if we win or if we lose, we just got to charge it to the game. Make sure you guys also check out my man Gate City Sports. Does an amazing job covering your Philadelphia Eagles, giving you guys that real cerebral football talking conversation. I just have two more topics I want to broach with you, Gates, if you don't mind. What's your perspective on the Myles Garrett market, right? A lot of fans are kind of bloviating about how exciting it would be to have him on. I'm seeing a lot of these sports pundits talk about how the Eagles are prime candidates to make the move, but you can't make a move like that without giving up maybe your arm and maybe a leg or two, right? So, what's your thoughts on the Myles Garrett market, and how do you gauge that situation? If it even is a possibility, just how do you see that thing playing out? Are the Eagles legit contenders for that guy?
I think it has to really start with his Cleveland series in terms of actually moving the player. And it seems like they're not really serious, but at the same time, like if someone makes them an offer they can't refuse, they'll take it, that kind of thing. When I looked at the contract, because everyone asked me the last time I did a live stream, everyone asked me about that. And I was like, let me just look at the contract while we're all here. Right. So I shared the screen and I showed it to him. And it is more affordable than I thought, Tone, to be quite honest. I was like, wow, like they really paid this man mostly in bonus money. And it looks like they may have restructured it at some point. So they're on the line for the bonus and restructure money unless we make an agreement to pay a percentage of it. But that would have to be an external agreement that gets made outside of that, which would absolutely probably change the valuation in terms of the draft capital that Cleveland would receive. So it's a very affordable contract to acquire. Now you can make the argument that like, yeah, but I mean, you think he's going to play on that contract, Steve? You think he's not going to want a little extra money there?
Yeah, that's the thing. He's looking for an extension, but he also wants to win. And
exactly.
it's kind of hard to get both of those in in a sign and trade. It's very difficult to go to a winning situation and think you're going to get the most that you can possibly get.
And the other thing that gets me is like if we're attaching players to the trade, man, Myles Garrett is like, he's a different level player. Like he's like a Jalen Carter type impact on a defensive line. But the problem is that the chemistry of your team matters.
Absolutely.
And Nolan Smith and Jordan Davis are very big in terms of the chemistry at the locker room. I mean, Nolan Smith played that game in the second half with a torn bicep. You know what I mean? Like Cam Jurgens played on a pretty messed up back.
Landon with the knee.
Landon Dickerson was going through it. Yeah. Like, I mean, those dudes were, that's the locker room, man. Like that's the chemistry inside of that thing. That's these guys being a brotherhood and going after it, together. Like I don't know, like, and I know that like it's not a concern in terms of like him coming in and disrupting the locker room. Like he's a good dude from what I understand. Like he's like A+ personality. Like they would love him in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
Those dudes went to college together and anything. Like I don't know, man. I don't. You don't know what you don't know, and I don't know what the result would be. Like you know what I'm saying, Tone? Like
And
I don't know how that would affect
his agent is Nicole Lynn as well. So
yeah, that's pretty important. Yeah, that's Jalen's agent. Yeah,
right. And Nicole Lynn has worked a lot of deals with Howie Roseman, and she's known as somebody that gets her guys paid for sure, but she's also known as someone who's, how do you say it? I guess the word would be reasonable. She's pleasant. She's pleasant to negotiate with, so to speak. Right.
I saw your old colleague, John McMullen, talking about it today. I was messing around with the baby. I had to her like preschool. They do home visits like once a month. So they were here, and I was like listening to them in the background, John McMullen and them, as we were like doing the PT physical therapy for the baby.
Yeah.
And I heard him talk a little bit about like some of the aspects of what we're discussing now. And he was talking about like whether or not we think Nolan Smith is like a 10, 11, 12 sack guy. My thing is like, yeah, I do think he has the potential to be. I think he's got that kind of potential. Yeah. I think he's got the kind of speed off the edge that you only see out of guys like Micah Parsons, Von Miller when he was really young.
Yeah.
There's a bend and twist to what he can do that just most dudes can't do. And it's not just pure speed, like a straight line running speed. It's the ability to contort and twist your body while moving fast.
And he led your team in sacks in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, like he really came on the back end of the season, really came on.
Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about a situation to where you can maintain Nolan Smith, you can maintain Jalix Hunt, and you're adding a guy like Myles Garrett. Like I am all in on that.
That's going to be difficult though.
Yeah, that's going to be incredibly difficult because Cleveland's going to want something. Now I will say, someone asked me about Bryce Huff, and I said, listen, I don't know how interested Cleveland is in the contract of Bryce Huff because I don't know how much of that is in essentially like how much of his contract is actually in base salary and how much of his contract is in bonuses. Because if it's a high base salary, it means they got to eat a ton of that money. Yeah. So we would have to kind of know those details. But I will say that, do I think Bryce Huff could be a 10+ sack guy with Jim Schwartz? Yes, I do. Because I think that Jim Schwartz would play him in a way that is advantageous to him, which is in a wide 9, where he has nothing with space to work in a pass rush. And I do think that that's where Bryce Huff would thrive. So like when people were asking me, I'm like, look, I do think that you put a guy like Bryce Huff with Jim Schwartz on that Cleveland defense where they can play coverage behind him. They're actually a good defense. Like, yeah. But he's susceptible in the run game. I don't think his lack of pass rush was the issue with the Eagles. I think the fact that he couldn't be trusted in the run game was more of the problem.
Yeah, it comes to the edge. Yeah, and people thought that would be a weakness for Nolan throughout his career, and he proved that very, very wrong. I mean, the way he
when I was
blew up
watching
games,
his college tape, that always confused me, Tone, because like when I watch his college tape, he was always a good run defender. Strong hands, really, really showed an ability to actually set the edge. Just, I think people looked at the frame and said he was too small.
Yeah. Sometimes people overthink it. I mean, he was playing in the SEC, going up against those top tier tackles. I mean, what more proof do you need, right? Let me ask you a final question before I get you out of here, man. Again, I really do appreciate the time you gave me. You gave me well over an hour, and I'm grateful for that. The combine is coming up. The combine starts tomorrow, actually, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I personally haven't had the opportunity to really dig too deep on these prospects, but I really am going to take the time to use the combine as a way to really learn more about these guys in a more organized way, right? When you think about the Philadelphia Eagles today, obviously we know there's a strong chance you could lose Sweat, you could lose Milton. We think Becton and Baun are the more likely guys to return. But when you just think about the way this team is built now, the way they're coached, are there any prospects that jump out to you that you would love to see in that Eagles green? Or just to take it a step further, who do you think is a feasible target for the Philadelphia Eagles that would fit what we're doing right now?
I think they're in a weird position picking 32, and I think they would like to get out of that spot. The problem is that, most of the draft analysts have said there's not really that quarterback. Like, the year that they were picking around this area, the 32, and that was the Lamar Jackson draft. They don't really see a Lamar Jackson type. I'll say that as we get closer to the draft, it's quarterbacks. There's a lot of these dudes that get drafted where they shouldn't be drafted, to be quite honest. But also you can look at like receivers and corners and things like that. Sometimes teams may value a fifth year more than other teams, at those position groups.
Right.
So that could be a potential there. If there's an offensive lineman that maybe the Eagles aren't in love with, but another team is, most teams are going to value a fifth year on an offensive lineman if they really got them graded like that. So I could see the Eagles moving back there. I think if they were being honest, they want to move back and they probably want to target like a tight end type or a running back type or something. I think they want to look for those values that they generally draft in the second round in terms of like tight end. I don't know how much they're looking for running back at that spot. I still think it's probably a little rich while you still got Saquon here for at least one more year. So I don't think that they're desperate for a running back per se, but I think if the right guy's there, they're not going to hesitate to make that type of play. In terms of that, man, I think trading back and getting in position for probably tight end is a big one to watch for, offensive line or defensive tackle. Like the player that stands out to me, and I don't know his value, I think if you're picking at the bottom end of the second round, I think it's about where he should be drafted. This young man was teammates with Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Alexander. I went and watched this tape about a couple of weeks ago, and I came away going, bro, he would fit the Eagles. Man, give me Quinyon's teammate, Darius Alexander. I like that young man. I like his tape. I think that's an underrated player. I think he's a really good player. I think he's got he's not like one of these guys where you look at the arm reach and you look at it and you're like, oh man, he's got all the measurables, but he's in the realm of where you're supposed to be for the position, right? I mean, to be fair to Milton Williams was under the measurements.
Yes.
The dude had T-Rex arms, to be fair about it. Like Micah, he got them T-Rex arms. But what Milton Williams did well was hip leverage. He knew how to shoot his hips correctly at the right angle and actually engage with his hands, and he was strong in the hands. So while he didn't have that, idealized reach, the rest of the fundamentals were there for him. I look at a guy and I'm looking at what I see on tape from Darius Alexander. I'm like, I like this guy a lot. I like him a lot. The other guys I watched some tape on, and I got a lot of dudes I got to run tape on still, to be quite honest about it. But I've watched Kenneth Grant. I think he's going to be more of a nose type and type of like our type of systems. So I don't know if he's going to be a fit here, especially if JD's still on the roster. But right. Mason Graham, who I don't think will be anywhere near 32, but Mason Graham is definitely a guy that his tape's pretty impressive. Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. I don't think he would last to the 32nd pick, but you never know. Sometimes these boards get shaped in a way that you can't predict, right? He's a guy. So Grant, Nolan, Graham, I watched film on all those guys. I liked all of their tape. And I watched film on the young man that's playing out there for Toledo, Darius Alexander. He's a guy that
And these guys play what position again? They're
interior D linemen.
Okay.
In terms of the edges, I haven't had a chance to really dive too deep into the edge tape.
Okay.
I got on my note, but they're all closed down.
Oh,
I did have the young man who led the FBS in sacks last year. I want to say here, I think he's playing like Ohio or somewhere like that, sir. Something like that. Like his tape was pretty impressive, man. He's rated pretty highly in terms of his pass.
Is it
his run, his run defense grade? Green, yeah. His run defense grade is really high, but I don't think his tape matches the grade. But I can tell you that as a guy that is a dude stepping in to be
Mike Green out of Marshall.
Yep, Mike Green out of Marshall. Yep. Yeah, West Virginia, not Ohio.
Williamsburg, Virginia.
Yep. So he's a guy that when I watched the tape on him, as a specialized pass rusher, I think he can be an immediate contributor. I definitely think he can come in on third down in certain type of pass rush situations and really give you some decent snaps. I would love the combination of Green, the combination of, Nolan Smith, the combination of Jalix Hunt, and then you add a veteran guy. You need a guy that's been there and done it before. Right. And you can, they don't need to be top of the line, but they need to be playable. You know what I mean? They need to be a guy that can contribute. And if you needed them to start, they can help you out. You need that type of player, I think. It's going to be interesting the way they play this draft, Tone, because I don't think they're where they want to be in this draft, right? Because right now at 32, they probably have to take a guy either at the edge, the interior D line, out at tackle, or the interior O line that maybe they probably wouldn't have that same grade on them unless the board falls a certain way. So then you kind of have to overdraft somebody at a position that you normally pay for the 5th-year option for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, that 32 spot, it's easy to overvalue, it's easy to undervalue.
Yep. Yeah, that's like those guys are the dudes I've run early tape on. I'm like, oh wow, like there's something there. Like the Mike Green young man, like I thought that was going to be all hype, and I turned the tape on. I'm like, oh wow, like this dude's got like a pretty impressive pass rush toolbox for his age. Like this is pretty impressive for what he is. Like I still think that when I was watching the tape, I was like, I'm not sold on his. I'm not quite sold yet on his run defense prowess. I think it's a little more hype there than reality of what the tape shows. But I definitely think he's got the frame to grow into it. I do think that with the right, Clint Hurt's not going to let you get by like that. Like you're going to do it. If you want to play for Clint Hurt, you want to learn to do it. So I do think like that's it would be an ideal situation for him to grow into it. And I do see some elite traits from him as a pass rusher. So I really like the Darius Alexander young man from Marshall. He's Toledo, and then I like the green kid coming out of Marshall. I think those two guys in particular, they definitely kind of struck me. And there's a bunch of tight ends in this draft class that are pretty good. The other one I'd say is a sneaky need, depending on what they do with Cooper DeJean, is nickel. That can be a sneaky need depending on what they do.
I think he should stay there because
I do too. I agree with you. I don't think they should move him.
But
I think if they do move him, it should be one of those things that when we're in base, he plays outside, but then when we're in our sub packages, he's playing nickel. I think that's the way it should be treated.
I love him there, man.
And then you move Isaiah Rodgers outside in the sub packages. I think Isaiah Rodgers can do it, but that's assuming that Darius Slay's not coming back for a year.
Yeah, that's another thing, man. The whole Darius Slay, Isaiah Rodgers, Kelly Ringo dynamic. I mean, if Slay doesn't come back, who gets the nod? I mean, Isaiah Rodgers, I think, is supposed to be a free agent as well. So I think he's earned himself some money. He's put in some good tape this season.
I think the early indicators from what I heard about Isaiah Rodgers is they want to bring him back. Now, want to bring him back and bring him back, very different statements. So, he is one of the players I did hear. I heard that Mekhi Becton, Isaiah Rodgers, and Zack Baun were the three that it looked like were trending positively towards returning for the Eagles.
Yeah.
But yeah.
For sure. Gates, man, thank you so much for providing your insight to the channel, man. It means a lot to me, my guy. Goes a long way. It's funny. Like I said, last time we spoke, we were trying to figure out whether or not this team could get it done. All of a sudden, now they're Super Bowl champions, and we're talking about the next crop of guys that's going to come in and make an impact, and what Howie Roseman is going to do to continue to keep this roster as formidable as it is. Jalen Hurts, Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP. Man, oh man, they died on him, Gates. They died on him, but he showed improve, my friend. Any final words before I get you out of here, my guy?
Nah, man, just what a heck of a season, bro. Like this was, I was talking about it on my live stream, and I said, as impressive as that Super Bowl win was, because it shut everybody up with that whole crap about you don't have to the AFC, you don't have to take that path. You put the Chiefs in this path, and they weren't even making the Super Bowl. Like, let's just be real. They were getting stomped the way Washington got stomped. So I'm not too sure the path was the issue here, guys. I think the Eagles were incredibly talented, and people were too late to recognize it. But if you listen to players, the players kept telling you, "Hey, man, the best team we played this year was the Eagles." Like,
that's a good point.
The Ravens players were saying that. Everyone kept telling them that. And like, I mean, it was. I've never watched the Super Bowl, Tone, where I started to really feel bad for the opponent. Like, damn, guys, hang in there, man. Come on, man. It's not over yet. Come on, guys.
He said, "Hang in there." Listen,
I feel like I was watching a Pop Warner game, man.
Dog, what's so funny? Last thing, going into that game, everyone kept saying, "Yeah, the Eagles are more talented, but hey, you can't bet against Mahomes, can't bet against Andy Reid." And I think this is one of those games that recalibrated the mindset and say, "Listen, every situation isn't just, hey, Mahomes can save everybody." When the reality is, big talented guys beat up on little talented guys, and the best players, the best combination of talent, typically wins the football game. Right, but it always comes down to execution as well. the Eagles just not only were they more talented than them in that game, they out executed them in every way. And when you can't if anything, when you're the least talented team, at the very least you gotta win the execution battle. And the Chiefs failed on both marks. And I think the Chiefs roster kind of got exposed, kind of similarly to the way the 2023 Eagles did it, but obviously the Chiefs made it to a Super Bowl and they were able to overcome it because of how great their quarterback was. But you really saw the talent disparity and how much more work they had to do with that roster. Just based off how they looked when they played the Eagles. The talent disparity was so jarring. It was jarring.
Yeah, it was very obvious when you're watching a game. Just the physicality that you could just see the difference in physicality. Like it was just very obvious. Like how ironic is it that Chip Kelly's saying big guys beat up on little guys, right? Yeah, that's cool. Howie was the one that was able to get it done though by doing that. The dude you sent to the broom closet,
the guy you sent to the broom closet,
built a roster like that.
Oh my God, Gates, man, thank you so much, my friend. Well wishes to you, well wishes to your family. The new addition, my friend. I'm grateful for you, and I can't wait to have you on again, my man. You take care, all right?
All right, Tony, I appreciate you, buddy.
Yes, sir. Shout out to my man Gates City, man. That was phenomenal. That was really phenomenal. Gates always does an amazing job providing the content, providing the insight. Really appreciate you guys for being good sports about everything. Thank you guys for all of your contributions to the show as well. Make sure you guys smash that like button. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you guys stay engaged. It really helps the content grow. And we're going to get out of here, you guys. Also, we have more content on the docket today. We have 2 pieces of content dropping. We got a clip that's going to premiere at some point later on. I believe that's 4 o'clock or 5 p.m. Eastern. And then we also have another live stream that's going to be going on at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure you guys lock in, man. Make sure you guys lock in. Means a lot, means a lot, means a lot. All right, you guys, we're out of here. You guys have been tuned in to a very great edition of the show. I'm your humble host, Tone DeShields II. You guys have been tuned in to Chalk It Up Sports on the Chalk It Up Network, where no matter if we win or if we lose, we just got to charge to the game. See you guys later.